Welcome everyone to the webinar on integrating gender lens into an investment strategy. My name is Komal Sahu and I serve as the Chief of Impact and Sustainable Finance at AVPN, and I will be moderating today's event. Your host today is Asia Venture Philanthropy Network. AVPN is a network of 600 plus members that include development finance institutions, family offices, banks, corporates, foundations, with the aim of moving capital towards impact. For today's webinar, we have three long-standing distinguished impact fund managers who will present their gender investing strategy and their learnings. They will showcase two of their recent deals in South and Southeast Asia and demonstrate the outcomes that can be achieved when investing with a gender lens. A few housekeeping announcements before moving on to the program proper. Please keep your microphone turned off. There is no need to turn on your video camera at any point during the session. Please use the app version of Adobe Connect for a better user experience. If at any point you get disconnected, you can reconnect using the same URL code we sent you. If you have a bad connection, try to log out and then log back in. Hopefully this would improve it. If you have any queries, please use the Q&A box that you see on your screen. We can all give it a try by writing now. Please note that during the presentations, your questions will only be visible to the AVPN team. Rest assured that we are monitoring this behind the scenes and will address as many of the questions as possible in the Q&A section of this webinar. Finally, we shall launch a poll after every presentation. Please do participate. With that, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Jennifer Buckely. Jennifer is a Senior Managing Director at SEEF, having joined after 20 years in private equity leadership roles focused on growing mid-sized businesses across Europe, Middle East, and Asia. During her career, she has worked at GE Capital, Goldman Sachs, and Fletcher Challenge in Auckland. She's on SEEF's Global Investment Committee and is based in Singapore, from where she leads SEEF's Women's Economic Empowerment Fund programs. A warm welcome to you, Jennifer. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk about SEEF's Gender Lens investing journey and share learnings about how we refined our Women's Economic Empowerment framework over time, as well as how we engage with our entrepreneurs around gender equality. SEEF is a global impact management firm established in 1989, which today has 30 offices across Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia, and Latin America. At its heart, SEEF's core business is on improving lives and communities through entrepreneur-focused investment. We believe SMEs are a vital factor to improving local communities and are committed to empowering entrepreneurs to achieve both financial and social success. We also see the importance of developing the entrepreneur ecosystem in countries where we operate. We have invested 40 emerging markets funds, as well as created the Center for Entrepreneurship and Executive Development, which we call SEED. Today we have 14 SEEDs providing peer-to-peer learning programs to thousands of entrepreneurs in these countries. And I would say within the SEED profile, around a third of those entrepreneurs would be women entrepreneurs in those markets. Women's economic empowerment has always been a key impact theme of SEEF. It's represented 75 of our over 450 investments over the last 30 years. Our partnership with the Australian government's Investing in Women program in Southeast Asia was the first time SEEF had invested a dedicated pool of capital for women. And through this program, we involved our Women's Economic Empowerment framework, which focuses today on women entrepreneurs, leaders, employees, consumers, as well as role models for gender equality. Role models are essential to closing gender gaps, which is what first led SEEF to develop the Gender Equality Scorecard, enabling us to engage with entrepreneurs on the importance of diversity considerations. GES is now integral to all of SEEF's gender work. Today, our flagship gender fund, the $100 million SEAF Women's Economic Empowerment Fund, will invest growth capital in 10 to 12 Southeast Asian EBITDA positive businesses supporting women. The gender framework, though, has also been integrated into other SEAF SME funds in Bangladesh, the Caribbean, Central America, Jordan, and our Refugee and Displaced Population Fund. Gender norms show disproportionate impact on women in the COVID pandemic, thereby revealing vulnerabilities. Though there is a high female business ownership across the region, women face a number of additional disadvantages that hamper their potential as entrepreneurs, which include social and cultural norms, gender stereotypes, lack of access to decision-making, and unequal access to resources. Due to these factors, SEAF is expanding a planned Global Women's Debt Fund that was due to become operational this year by bringing an additional Global COVID Emergency SME Loan Fund for women on stream in coming months to ensure that women entrepreneurs are provided with the funding and business support they need to both navigate through the crisis and prepare for the post-COVID world. In discussing women's economic empowerment with our investors, SEAF focuses on the concepts of, firstly, identifying latent value. So highlighting with our investors where gender biases lead to undervaluation of certain businesses, with predictable economic undervaluation providing opportunities to invest in women. And secondly, building value in our investments, both through the conventional value creation one would expect of a private equity firm focused on operational excellence, but more critically by shaping gender equality and women's empowerment in the company's leadership, business practices, workforce policies, and compensation. Coming back to the idea of identifying latent value, we look at 4 pillars there. One is women's-led firms, and that was the focus of the Invested in Women program and our first SEAF Women's Opportunity Fund. But as we developed the learnings from that program, we recognized that there were many businesses in the region that were actually closing women's economic empowerment gaps that weren't necessarily being led by women. So we expanded the pillars we look at to also include firms and sectors where women are more prevalent or comprise a large portion of the workforce. There, what we're looking for is women whose lives can be positively changed through offering broader and more innovative career paths and professional development opportunities, higher pay, flexible working opportunities, allowing them to balance their family and household responsibilities. Such paths often begin with entry-level positions, but subsequently we can support those women to be propelled through progressive internal career development approaches and through leveraging the HR policies of those firms to encourage job retention and career advancement for women employees. The third pillar we look at is companies that are providing products and services meeting the unmet needs and wants of women and girls. Such products and services can be tools for economic empowerment at so many levels in personal and professional lives of women and girls. And finally, the one I mentioned earlier, which was around focusing on role models. So beyond empowerment impact of the female workers of such companies, an investment in these firms serves as critical role models for other companies and investors that lead to a knock-on effect for women's economic empowerment. At the core of SEAF's gender program is a woman-centered strategy with a measurement mechanism to track gender equality from screening to due diligence to portfolio management and exit. The Gender Equality Scorecard is the principal tool to identify the main opportunities of or weaknesses within investments for improving gender equality and company value, and has been developed by seeking input from development finance institutions, field builders, governments, and our peers who have been piloting the tool globally. It provides a practical and constructive framework to facilitate conversations with entrepreneurs on where gender needs to be addressed in the business and identify leadership teams who are committed to gender equality in such areas as workforce participation, pay equity, and others. And our screening and due diligence process Gender equality related questions are asked as part of the company introduction and business review sessions, rather than in a separate gender one. We look for clues as to the entrepreneur's commitment to improving company practices, including recruitment and hiring strategy, training programs, procurement processes, marketing strategies, and flexible working arrangements and more. Once the company is scored across the 6 gender sector areas for improvement are prioritized, and detailed gender equality value creation projects are reflected in the term sheet, mutually agreed 100-day plan, and longer-term value creation plan. SEEF is now working with the academic community to have the GES enhanced inside a leading gender institute, so the scoring mechanism can then be rolled out over the wider private equity and impact investment community that will hopefully over time allow thousands of private companies to be scored and allow academics to do further research between the correlation of gender equality and wider diversity considerations and business performance, be it financial or social or investment returns. Entrepreneur buy-in is key, and early conversations around GES involve articulating SEEF's conviction that gender equality can be a main driver of improved business performance, discussing the types of things you see on the side there in the green box, whether it's about attracting and retaining talent, increasing productivity, ensuring better morale in the firm, reducing the level of employee turnover. It is vital in this process that entrepreneurs understand SEEF as an investor views gender equality as a means to improve the company. As I'm sure all of you are aware, in Southeast Asia, both the SEEF team and women entrepreneurs here have been dealing with COVID response-related issues for the past 4 months. The GES has provided us with a framework to consider as we are taking difficult decisions around business survival, and the impact of women has been a key influencer in all, whether it's shown in our bakery investment in Indonesia, our maternal hospital in Vietnam, or our EdTech investment also in Vietnam. Today there are 6 companies in SEEF's Women's Opportunity Fund portfolio, 3 in Vietnam, 1 in Indonesia, and 2 in the Philippines, covering a range of industries: healthcare, education, food, personal care, and business services, cloud accounting services. Now I'd like to share with you a couple of case studies from the portfolio, both from Vietnam. Phuong Cha Hospital is a hospital group focused on women and newborns in the Mekong Delta region of Vietnam, an area of 17.5 million people. The founder, Dr. Ho, an OBGYN physician, saw the need to establish a facility to fill a critical gap for families caused by the lack of local high-quality maternal health services. Today, Phuong Cha offers a wide set of services such as pediatrics and general medicine, releasing pressure from the public hospital systems and providing access to healthcare services tracking to global JCI certification standards. The majority of the employees are women, and the investment is providing skilled job opportunities and training for them. Currently, the crisis has seen Phuong Cha's sales drop by 18% in the first quarter as social distancing measures were introduced. Patients chose to limit their visits to crowded places, and as a result delayed non-emergency medical needs, including IVF treatment and children's vaccinations. SEEF, as well as the Phuong Cha team, are concerned about the women's health challenges in the region as routine monitoring and check-up services for pregnant women and newborns have been reduced. They are working to establish a mobile medical team to allow these services to be carried out safely within patients' homes while still meeting the Ministry of Health regulations in Vietnam. SEEF has been seeking grant funding to support the establishment of this mobile service. Kina, another of the SEEF Women's Opportunity Fund portfolio companies. It's a leading provider of online education courses targeting Vietnamese parents and children. Kina was founded by a woman entrepreneur who strongly believes that technology can bring better and fairer access to all Vietnamese people, especially women and children. With the platform, learners from different parts of the country can access qualified courses on demand at a reasonable cost. Kina has served over 140,000 parents and parents-to-be who choose to learn from the company's parenting and parenting-related online courses versus other alternatives because Kina's offerings are valued for their deep knowledge, easy control over time, and constraint-free access to reliable information. Kina for Kids targets children aged 3 to 11 whose parents are seeking support in English and maths as priority subjects due to their importance and future employability. The majority of the employees in the business are women. The investment has created impact by firstly providing easy access to an educational platform to the wider population, secondly eliminating gender disparities in education, and finally ensuring equal access to quality affordable early childhood development courses. So that's what I was wanting to speak about today regarding our journey and to give you some examples of companies we've been working with in this area. And I welcome taking any questions that you may have for the final few minutes.
Jennifer, what we were going to do was we were going to take the questions right at the very end. Thank you so much. I think that frames the conversation for this afternoon really well. We have a poll that we'd like to present. As you can see from Jennifer's presentation, there are clear and measurable values to integrating a gender lens into a fund. Yet despite the benefits, GLI has yet to hit the mainstream. We invite you to please participate in this poll to see what is needed to bring gender lens investing into the mainstream. Please feel free to select more than one answer. We will close the poll in a few more seconds to allow everyone to get their vote in. So it appears that people need better data and examples and financial returns of investing with a gender lens, but also appears that people need more learning opportunities for mainstream investors alongside practical guidance on how to actually implement with a gender lens. Both are things that we're aiming to do with webinars like this. Thank you for completing the poll. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Eric Savage. Eric Savage is a founding partner of Unitas Capital Growth Equity, a recently launched India Impact Growth Equity Fund. As the co-founder and CEO of Unitas Capital, an impact-focused investment bank, Eric moved to India in 2007 and helped to set up Unitas Capital and has led the company into raising more than $2.7 billion for various impact businesses. Through the work of Unitas Capital, Eric has had the privilege of working with many innovative companies that do life-changing work in the fields of affordable healthcare, financial inclusion, renewable energy, affordable education, women's empowerment, and agriculture. Eric, the mic is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot, Como. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you very much to AVPN for hosting this really important event. Certainly this topic is very near and dear to my heart, female empowerment through gender lens investing. I have a personal policy of avoiding panels, all male panels, and have often turned down speaking requests when that was the case. And so, usually suggesting a female colleague to take my place. So I'm very lucky on this panel that of course, that's not a concern at all. and that instead I'm the diversity component. So glad to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem for one time. I like data a lot, and so we'll share some. As I think probably most everyone on the call will know, we've massively underinvested in women-led businesses. The U.S. is where you get the most data from typically. In the U.S., only less than 3% of VC funding last year went to companies that were founded by a female founder or all-female founding member teams. And less than 12% went to companies that had any females in the founding team at all. And naturally, these statistics are dramatically worse if you look at women of color. And of course, the VC funds themselves are not much better. Only 12% of partners of VC funds are female, and 68% of the VCs in the US have no female partners at all. In India, the situation is frankly much worse. When you start talking about these numbers, you can immediately identify who are the VC or private equity female partners out there. It's that small a group. So this is an important topic. United's Capital Growth Equity is a new fund, but United's Capital as an organization is not, nor is our focus on gender lens in investing. United's Capital, we're an impact-focused investment bank based in Bangalore. We have 45 employees. We launched the firm back in 2008, when right at the same time Lehman was going bankrupt. So launching our fund to now in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic seems like the way we like to do things, the hard way. United's Capital was started with a very simple idea. We wanted to back great entrepreneurs to help them scale their impact to be much, much bigger, as we all know it's needed. It's frankly been a very rewarding experience, as we've seen most of these companies scale quite well. We've raised a little over $2.7 billion for our impactful clients over the last 12 years. And the work we've done really informs our learning and the fund that we're launching. And what we invest in now is innovative entrepreneurs with a focus on accessibility, affordability, inclusivity, and democracy of opportunity for underserved communities in India, with a gender lens on everything that we do. So in this presentation, I'll really focus on the how we do it rather than the what, as I believe that's what's of greatest interest to this audience. Now, this slide is probably difficult to read, but I think there are a few key things here. One is that, these are the companies that we've raised capital for in the past. So you'll see there's a large number of them, more than 110 that we've raised money for. We've been successful in 95% of the capital raises we've done for financial inclusion companies, and for a little less than 80% of our clients overall. Through our incredible team that we have, we have deep relationships, and so more than 90% of these clients were people where we had existing relationships. So some of my fellow team members, like Abhijit Ray, was a veteran. Was a co-founder of the company, was a veteran of this sector before we even started the company. And now many of my other colleagues have become people who are very experienced in this sector. The other thing that we're doing a bit differently as a firm is we're focused on Series B investments as a sweet spot. Whereas most impact investors rightly take great pride in coming in at the Series A level, which is super catalytic. And at the same time, there's a lot of liquidity in the market for later rounds, say Series D, Series C and D. In between, what we found is that the Series B, there's typically a gap, and that there are relatively fewer investors. And we've seen many of the best companies that we've worked with have found Series B to be their most difficult capital raise. Again, we wanted to look at the how we're doing things. And we, as an investor, we have strong views on where we can and where we can't add value. If you talk to most entrepreneurs, you'll actually get a very different view than talking to fund managers in terms of how much value the investors bring. We think there are kind of three distinct places where we can really add value. One is on relationships with investors, lenders, directors, hiring, those kind of things. Two is raising capital, and three is on exiting. And that's really kind of it. Whereas if many other investors believe they can bring value on technology, legal things, kind of going through huge amounts of data and other things, that frankly in many cases really waste the entrepreneur time. in entrepreneurs' time, and we're very determined to not do that. Moving on. Another huge part of where we think we bring a lot of experience is on the exiting side, which is very helpful in terms of making decisions when to enter a company, strategy, as well as how to get exits for ourselves as well as the other shareholders. We've facilitated 38 exits for different investors over the last few years, and frankly, that's produced really strong returns, an IRR of 39%, so an unusually high IRR with very strong exit multiples, as you can see here on the screen. And we've learned a few things. One, that certainly companies that are capital intensive are ones that when you're raising capital in the future, it facilitates a lot of these exits. So most of the exits have been, say, Series A or B investors selling out to later stage investors. We have done a few IPOs, and increasingly we're seeing some mergers, but we really think that there's a lot of liquidity in the private equity market that will provide most of the exits. For us, really, the entrepreneur is everything. And we've seen a lot of what has worked and what hasn't worked. And we're really looking for that rare combination of experience, passion, being inspiring, and having humility. There's naturally going to be lots of challenges for entrepreneurs, and you'll need all of these qualities to overcome them. On this page, we've highlighted a couple of entrepreneurs, Veena Mankar and Sanjay Sharma, that we would be excited to back. Our clear focus, as mentioned, is to back entrepreneurs. We are entrepreneurs ourselves and are excited to back entrepreneurs in both good times and bad times. We'll make our decisions based on data, the ability to exit, and the ability of the entrepreneur to own her decisions. We back entrepreneurs that have a passion for impact and that believe in diversity in all ways, as more diverse groups really make better decisions. There's lots of data that proves this, and so I'd be happy to share that with anyone who needs it. Similarly, in the usage of data, we take what we call a 4A approach: absorb, analyze, adapt, and act. Frankly, of these, acting is the most important. It's really that ability to execute. And the best ventures are the ones really, and the best plans are the ones naturally where people start. We map each of our investees to the SDGs, especially number 1 of no poverty and number 5 of gender equality, as well as, of course, education, healthcare, climate. Now, how we do this is by investing in the sectors where we have the most experience. Financial inclusion being the largest one, this is really where we've seen the most companies scale and have massive impact while providing very strong returns for investors. We'll also invest in healthcare, climate, education, and agriculture. Our focus geographically is India, and as mentioned, we have a gender lens overlay on everything that we do. As mentioned earlier, less than 3% of US VC funding has gone to companies with all female founding teams. We will invest at least 20%, and hopefully much more, of our fund into businesses that 1, are female-led, 2, have products that specifically improve the lives of women and girls, and 3, these enterprises that promote gender equality. This, frankly, we think this is a huge arbitrage opportunity, as we believe there's a large bias that keeps women-led businesses from attracting funding. We're raising a $100 to $150 million fund that will make 12 investments. And as mentioned earlier, our sweet spot is really in the Series B investments where we see a gap in the market. I'm super excited by the team that we have together. And I'm glad, it's just kind of coincidental, that we're walking the talk by having our two main partners be women, Richa Natarajan and Mona Kachwaha. Richa has been with United Capital for the last 10 years and led a lot of our signature transactions. Mona has been a senior impact investor for the last 13 years, having helped lead Caspian. And before that, she ran Citigroup's Indian microfinance team. Narayan Ramachandran is our longtime co-chair at United Capital. He previously ran Morgan Stanley's Global Emerging Markets Asset Management, a $25 billion business, and was also the chairman of RBL Bank, a leading private sector bank in India. For the rest of the team, we've featured a number of other key team members here: Spurti Kotla, Kylie Charlton, and Vikas Sarda, who's our CFO, and has been since the beginning, and has a lot of experience on the fund management side. Now I'll give you a couple of specific examples to try to make this more granular. So here we've highlighted two companies that we've raised capital for in the recent past, and also where we would consider investments. Avium is an amazing company based in Delhi, founded by a remarkable woman, Kajal Ilmi. Avium gives loans to women so that they can realize the dream of owning a house. They operate in the white space between traditional housing finance and microfinance. Borrowers' average combined family income is less than $300 per month. And the target customers are typically from informal or semi-formal sectors where they often don't have documented proof of income. As a policy, the woman of the house is the first applicant, and all other income members of the family are co-applicants. This has generally led to better repayment rates. Avium serves these people who want to improve and expand and construct new homes for their own usage. They've also give loans for sanitation and have successfully funded the construction of more than 7,000 toilets. They have a very innovative workforce, that more than 12,000 women that they call Avium Shaktis, who work part-time and help them source customers. They've raised, in the last couple of years, this is a very young company, they've raised more than $10 million of equity from three great investors, Insator in their Series A, and then Gojo and C4D and in Series B. And amazingly, even at this early stage, Insator has been able to secure an exit. Similarly impressive, they have attracted more than 22 lenders within their first few years of operations. Another incredible company co-founded and run by a visionary woman is Kaleidofin. Kaleidofin is a fintech company that provides financial solutions to low-income customers. They have a robo-advisory model with 92% of their customers being women and 97% of their clients earning less than $350 a month. Again, in a relatively short period of time, they've reached more than 400,000 users. Their neobanking platform, it uses other companies with established networks like microfinance institutions to reach their clients. While microfinance institutions typically offer a loan product, Kaleidofin main product is a savings product. Sucharita Mukherjee, is another incredible example of a fantastic female founder. She previously co-founded and ran another super impactful company, IFMR Capital, that scaled quite well. So again, this company has already attracted investment from Wyco Credit, Omidyar, Bloom Ventures, and others, with a Series B round coming up. So moving to summarize, our focus is really a combination of caring about impact for the underserved, especially women, and understanding what types of businesses scale well and what don't. And, we really feel that we have the data, the experience, the relationships, and the networks to be very successful. So I've said a lot, and I'll stop there, but certainly feel free to reach out to me, as we're excited to speak to anyone who would like to learn more. And I'm easily reachable through LinkedIn and email. Thanks, Komal.
Thank you, Eric. As you saw from Eric's presentation, women are integral to building a thriving economy and can have trouble gaining access to capital. For our next poll, we're interested to see what kind of financial products would you use to deploy with a gender lens. Grants, technical support, bonds, equity, working capital, short-term debt, other structured products. The poll will end soon, so please get your votes in. We'll give it a few more seconds because I can still see people are voting. So it appears that people want to invest in either working capital, short-term debt, or equity, which I think bodes well for the gender lens investing businesses because people are prepared to think of them as commercially viable investment opportunities. Thank you everyone for submitting your answer. Our next speaker today, our final speaker, is Shuyin Tang. Shuyin is a partner at Patama Capital, a venture capital firm that targets risk-commensurate returns for its investors while also seeking to unlock better economic opportunities for Asia's low-income communities. Shuyin is responsible for Patama's investing activities in the Mekong region and has led investments into education, fintech, employee benefits, and healthcare companies. She spearheads Patama's gender lens investing efforts, including managing one of the first gender lens investing funds in Southeast Asia, the Investing in Women Fund. Shuyin, the mic is given to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone on the call. It's great to see so many participants here today and the level of interest in gender lens investing. So in this presentation, as Jennifer and Eric have also done, I'm going to focus not so much on describing, what exactly we've done at Patama Capital, but more our thought processes and even some of my personal stories on what it's meant to be investing with a gender lens. So before I get into the presentation, I do have to give a quick little legal disclaimer that what I'm sharing today is more for educational and informational purposes rather than marketing any of Patama Capital's investment products. Now that's out of the way, I wanted to start at the very beginning. So a little bit about why and how we got started with gender lens investing. There was actually a particular defining moment when we decided to engage with gender lens investing in a formal way. And that was actually when we applied to be a fund manager for the Investing in Women program, which has already been referenced a few times on this webinar. It actually wasn't the most obvious thing for us at Patama. Many of us on the team, myself included actually, hadn't really heard about gender lens investing before. And as a firm, we hadn't really engaged in any type of blended finance structures or instruments. So it was, very innovative and a bit new for us as well. So what motivated us to really engage with the gender lens? I think part of it was our history. So we've been supporting and growing microfinance organizations in our past life as part of the Unitas family. And we really had observed the outsized role that women have played in the microfinance sector. And we actually saw that playing out increasingly in our day-to-day work investing in Southeast Asia. We saw more and more entrepreneurial leaders who were female, but we also saw the role that women had in driving consumer spending patterns. And I think there's some, widely cited data out there which show that, 2/3 or even higher of consumer spending is driven by women. So we saw these shifting trends and, had an instinct and a desire to really better understand where markets were heading and capture these opportunities. So I think that's what really motivated us to think about how we could apply a more formal gender lens process and approach in our work. To cut a long story short, we applied for the Investing in Women program. We were selected, and over the past 3 years have rolled out a number of different initiatives, which have really been the cornerstone and foundation of a lot of our gender lens work. So the first one is an investment fund through which we've made 14 investments into women-led companies in Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Secondly, we've run an accelerator program, so 2 cohorts, the first centered around sustainable agriculture, and the second one around innovative and ethical fashion. And the final piece, which in many ways is kind of the most lasting and transformative piece, is really the Gender Lens Toolkit, which I'll speak a little bit more on the next slide. So we've developed a gender lens investing approach, which is really focused on changing the process. Why we decided to take this approach is we realized it's, relatively easy to point some capital towards female entrepreneurs. So this idea of, let's find some female entrepreneurs and invest in them. That's great, but, we realized that deeper and lasting change would actually require unpacking our investment process in detail and making changes at every step of the way. So what we did was we mapped out our investment process from pipeline development, screening, due diligence, to post-deal engagement and ultimately exit, even though that's not on the slide, and thought about, how were each of these steps gendered, and what were some of the opportunities we had to improve our process at each of these points. So in pipeline development, there's certainly some obvious things that we have done there, such as having a greater presence at women-focused events and also communicating our commitment to gender lens investing. There's also some more subtle changes and things that we've been doing, such as tracking the the network of our referrers. As you know, a lot of VC is driven by referrals and introductions, and we were trying to understand if those networks were also gendered, and the way that we were sourcing deals more generally. In due diligence, we've really focused on conducting a deep gender analysis. And, I want to emphasize that this goes a lot further than, say, asking, what percentage of a company's customers are female. It means, for example, taking apart the product design process and understanding whether it takes into account the different needs and preferences of women as well as men. We also look at gender disaggregated data in terms of, say, loyalty or retention, customer feedback, and look for gender patterns amongst those. And we also look at things such as decision-making power and control, right, both at the company level and also for customers, in terms of deciding whether or not to use a particular product or service. So we've turned a lot of these, questions and I guess what we call conversation starters into a practical tool, which our deal team is using. And as I get into the examples, I can share more about how we've actually been able to use it. I also want to stress that this has been a really integral part of our process. We have actually, changed some of our recommendations or decisions on a deal based on gender-related factors. So it's definitely more than, checking a box. It's really changed and shaped the way that we thought about our investments. And then finally, I think it's really important to emphasize that, the discussions about gender do not stop at the investment decision. It's really something that we've continued into our engagement with the company as board members, board observers, and people who are working and engaging closely with the management team. And we're continuing to bring these discussions to the forefront. So I know sometimes, gender analysis can seem a little bit theoretical, and I have to admit it did to me at first as well. So I wanted to spend the remainder of my time on some practical examples of actually the first 2 investments that we made from our Investing in Women fund. The first company is Cybox. It's a farm-to-table platform in Indonesia. So basically connecting small farmers directly to buyers. These could be consumers, retail consumers like you and me, and also small restaurants, cafes, and businesses who are on selling the fresh produce. It's an incredible business. It actually has built up kind of supply chain which can deliver fresh produce from all over, which is sourced from all over Java to customers in less than 24 hours. There's a very strong gender aspect to this company. 2 out of the 3 co-founders, and the 2 active co-founders, in fact, the chief executive officer and the CMO are both women, and the vast majority of the staff and customers are women as well. In the case of, Cybox, on the far left, wanted to share a little bit of some of the observations that we had when we were first looking at this deal. I think obviously, as a venture capital firm, when we're doing due diligence on a company, a key question we always ask is, does this founder or set of co-founders have what it takes to, firstly achieve product market fit and then scale the company? I would say, when we first looked at the profile of the CEO, she didn't seem like kind of that stereotypical tech founder, right? And I think we noticed that we had also been, influenced unconsciously by a lot of the pervasive stereotypes that are out there about what a typical founder might look like. When we looked closer, though, at the results that she'd achieved at the company, and her skill set and her network, we actually saw that they were really invaluable to the company's success. The company had executed extremely well with very little capital, achieved product market fit, and were already showing early signs of scaling fast when we were doing first due diligence back in 2017. We also saw that the CEO and her team really understood their segment extremely well, and I think this touches also on one of Eric's points around, does the management team have this real hunger for really understanding the customer and their needs? And in this case, we were absolutely convinced that they did. Moving on to kind of the second column, I often get asked some questions like, this gender analysis is interesting, but does it actually play a role in the way you might structure a deal, for example? Do you think about, different terms or putting it together differently? In this case, would like to share that gender dynamics certainly did come up as we were structuring the deal, and there's a couple of tangible examples of that. The first was in terms of the relative shares, equity shares of the three co-founders. As I mentioned, the two active co-founders were female, and there was a non-active co-founder who was male. Of course, there's a number of reasons why we'd want to restructure a cap table to more adequately incentivize the active co-founders. I think, of course, you want the people really driving the business day to day to be rewarded. But I think, we were also conscious, I think, the whole time of the dynamics whereby women do get shortchanged sometimes in terms of the original equity allocations at companies. So I think that was something that we had in mind as well. Then, in terms of the second point, there's interesting data, which I'm sure many of us on this call have seen before, which shows that female founders are often underestimated and, on average, receive investment offers which are actually less than what they're looking for, and actually less than similar male-led companies. And in this case, we actually flipped that on its head, and our conviction in the company and our expectation of growth for this business actually led us to advocate for a larger round. So I thought that was quite an interesting dynamic there. In terms of where Firebox is today, it has actually grown to become the largest B2C e-distributor of fresh produce in Indonesia. And this is actually ahead of several very well-funded competitors. It's turned into a very hot space. But right now the company is doing about $2 million of monthly net revenue. It's actually one of those businesses which has seen a bit of a positive bump from COVID-19, and is in the process of raising a $10 million Series B. So I think, again, to emphasize the fact that I think a lot of the company's success has to do with this laser focus on really understanding their customer segment better than anyone else, and building a team which can do that. Moving on to the second case study, this company is called Zupiek. It's a company in Vietnam. They're essentially trying to formalize this informal market around cleaning services. So as you can imagine, in Vietnam, like in many other countries, the market for cleaning services is very informal. It relies a lot on word of mouth, referrals in terms of finding a cleaner. And at Zupiek, they essentially wanted to professionalize this, set up a service whereby you could, book a cleaner to come to your house 2 to 3 times a week on a regular basis, and build that kind of stability and consistency into the process. They also run a lot of training for their cleaners, and for their long-serving cleaners also provide health insurance and other benefits which are typically not available. And then moving on to, again, some of the, gender analysis and realizations that we had as we were looking at this company. Firstly, in our initial due diligence, one of the things that we really pressure tested a lot was, is this platform really generating a positive livelihood impact for its cleaners? Cleaning is a low-paying industry overall, and the company certainly wasn't, transforming that overnight. And then also at the back of our minds was this question of, were we cementing this concept that women are primarily responsible for household work? we did a lot of different exercises. We did some mystery shopping. We did some cleaner surveys, a lot of retention analysis to see the loyalty of the cleaners, and ultimately, became convinced that that the company was adding value to the cleaners' lives, that the pay was an improvement upon industry standards, and that the cleaners really valued the opportunity to be working at the company. And we also saw, which I think is in the second bullet point there, that the company was really professionalizing the industry, right, and creating also a career path for the cleaners. If they were one of the top performers, they could actually be promoted to be a group leader who would be responsible for supervising the cleaners in a particular area, and that was kind of a first for many of the women working on the platform. Another interesting aspect of this company is it actually has a male CEO, and in the beginning, there could definitely be some skepticism around that. But I think again, coming back to this idea of customer centricity and really staying close to the customer, we saw that he did. He was always striving to understand both the cleaner as well as the kind of customer, the user better, and also built a predominantly female C-suite and management team around him. I think he's actually one of the very few men at the company. Turning to our post-investment engagement, I think gender lens discussions have been at the forefront, I think, since the time of our investment. I think one particular example of that is some of the work that we did with Care International, the NGO, to conduct some deeper research and provide some capacity building for the cleaners. So I think I'm a bit short on time, so I might kind of skip through some of these findings. But I think it's a great example of how we can tap into gender lens expertise in other parts of the community, and not necessarily in the investing community itself. Just sharing a couple of lessons learned that we had along the journey. I think the first one is just get started and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think at the beginning we were a little, we were like, oh, do we have the perfect tool? Is it, robust enough? Is it, concrete enough? I think actually just jumping into it and, refining it along the way was, allowed us to get to our current point. I think the second piece, which I think other speakers have also emphasized, is it's really helpful sometimes to make gender an organic part of the process. So not a very artificial or forced conversation that you kind of tack on to the end of discussions. The third piece, I think this has already been emphasized as well, is that, show that gender, adds value, as I think we all believe it does, in a very practical way, right? And I think that really opens up the door to having these conversations and also generating action. And I think I have mentioned this, the fourth point, which is that, it doesn't really stop at the investment or portfolio construction decision. It's something that really continues for the whole lifetime of the fund. And I think that's been really important for us, just keeping these conversations at the forefront. And then the final point is, I think there is sometimes a bit of confusion, because I think gender lens investing can look different across different funds. And, for example, for some of our funds, it's kind of the guiding force and guiding principle, like the Investing in Women Fund. For some of our other funds, it's more, one of the many lenses that we approach our investment strategy with. Finally, just spending one last minute on some of the future directions for us at Panama. I think in short, one of the really interesting opportunities we identified while deploying the Investing in Women Fund was that there were a lot of profitable, moderate growth businesses out there, which didn't necessarily fit the traditional venture capital model, right? So more consistent growth companies, not necessarily like the fabled unicorns, which everyone was looking for. And we're actually in the process of building a fund which we hope will serve those businesses' needs. And that's meant adapting our investment toolkit, more of a focus towards debt. So really interesting to see the survey results there. And then also a number of different directions in terms of structuring the fund. So an evergreen structure, as well as moving towards a different kind of incentive structure for the fund manager. I know I'm short on time, so I'll wrap it up there and look forward to questions.
Thank you so much, Shuyin. Just a reminder, keep your questions coming in the Q&A pod, and we will try and get to as many of them as we can, but also we can answer a few of them after the webinar ends as well. Our next poll, we want to see which thematic causes have the greatest intersection with gender lens investing. climate and agriculture, livelihoods, education, health and nutrition. We will close the poll up in a few seconds. It seems that livelihoods have the greatest intersection with gender lens investing. And that's quite true because women are often responsible for the entire family, households, expenditure, savings, and so on. So livelihoods are the ones perhaps that are the most impacted with gender lens investing. I would like to kick off the Q&A with our first question. COVID has had a dramatic impact on financial markets. What steps have you taken as a fund manager to mitigate the impact on your business? Jennifer, could you answer that, please?
Well, at the fund manager level, because we're a global business, we had to do like the practical organizational things about allowing adjustments for people working from home and ensuring that they were safe in each of the city markets we operate in. I think what we've also, so one specific aspect to CEF, as I mentioned, is we have these centres for entrepreneurship and executive development, which are running peer-to-peer training. And the support that the entrepreneurs need through the crisis has been absolutely critical as far as giving them information on how to tackle issues that they're facing, but also in the solidarity and community that comes together and having them working together on a peer-to-peer basis. So in the space of just a week, we had to take what was more sort of a physical setting and bring that into a digital environment across 40 markets with different sort of capabilities from a broadband perspective and other things. So that was a major achievement from CEF over this time.
Eric?
Yes, so I think for us, the immediate focus, like many businesses, was looking at our cash and making sure we had plenty of that. Obviously, looking at the safety of our employees as well as advising our clients and investees on both those fronts, on both the health and cash positions, and making sure those were shored up. And then I think in terms of somebody who's raising a fund right now, of course, this is extraordinary. Raising a fund is very challenging generally. It's multiple times that in this environment. But I think the silver lining on that is that, of course, as having capital as we emerge from this crisis will be something that where you'll have a much wider range of opportunities to look at investing in, as well as more attractive valuations coming out of it. So I think that's the silver lining.
Shuyin?
Right. I won't repeat what the other presenters have already said, but I think just to expand on the silver lining idea, I think one of the things we've been talking about within the impact and gender lens community is this has certainly forced us to hit the pause button right in many ways, and prompt a larger reflection on our lifestyles, how we use our money, how we invest, and we're actually hopeful that this could provide some interesting impetus and also data, which might heighten interest in impact investing and gender lens investing. I think some of the early theses that we're seeing is that some of our investments are actually quite uncorrelated to the broader financial markets, and focused on industries and sectors which are much more catering to kind of basic needs, right, which are far more resilient in such a crisis. So it's really interesting. I hope this is something we can explore together as a community, what actually opportunities COVID has for us as well.
We've had a number of questions in our Q&A pod, and thank you for keeping those coming in. One of the questions that specifically came out is, how do you address SDG 1 in your program? So Jennifer, if you could answer that one first, please.
Sure. I would say within our gender work, sometimes people link women's economic empowerment and gender equality purely to SDG number 5. And I think from our perspective, what we see is women's economic empowerment is essential to the delivery of all 17 SDG goals. And we're working quite closely with UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific on bridging gaps in that area. The link for number 1 tends to be around economic growth impact on poverty reduction, but anyone wanting more information on that particular topic, please feel free to email me or go on the CEF website where there is an insight article on the link between the SDGs and women's economic empowerment and our Creating Impact Women's Economic Empowerment area.
What about yourself, Eric and Shuyin?
Yeah, so for us, SDG number 1, which didn't exist at the time we launched our firm, but it was really the reason that we launched. The tagline of Unitas Labs, which incubated us, was innovative solutions to poverty. And so trying to find solutions at scale, poverty is always been what we do. So the vast majority of the companies that we focus on are ones that benefit large numbers of low-income people. Frankly, on the gender side is the one space where we're happy to make an exception. We're happy to work with a business that disproportionately benefits women, even if there isn't a poverty angle to it. Although naturally, things that benefit women tend to be much more likely to have an impact on poverty than businesses that specifically benefit men.
Shuyin, actually, we'll move on to the next question because there's one specifically that people have asked about Patama Capital. Someone asked about, you spoke about tracking the network of enterprises during the pipeline development. Can you share a bit more about what that mapping process looks like and how is that different when developing pipelines for non-gender lens portfolio development?
Sure. I think just to begin with, I think a lot of the kind of gender-focused, or the gender lens that we apply is actually across our entire portfolio, right? Whether it's the Investing in Women Fund or some of our other funds like Patama 1 and Patama 2, we have begun tracking gender disaggregated data for all of these funds. As for the pipeline development piece specifically, we've actually, so we use tools like I'm sure many of you do, it's a bit, Affinity, Salesforce, etc. So in our CRM, we've actually begun logging much more gender data around, both the company itself, so what, their, high-level gender metrics are, as well as who actually referred us the deal, right? And I think that's what I meant when I was talking about, how do we look at our network and what are some of the gender patterns there. So I think by tracking the referrer, which is a really key part of the investment kind of community or process, we are beginning to gather more insights around around gender patterns in our network.
Thank you. I guess we're running out of time, so I'm going to ask one final question. For those of the audience that are thinking about including gender lens in their investing strategy, based on your experience, what should be the 3 most important factors they should bear in mind when building out that strategy? So if I could have each of you answer that, please. Jennifer?
So from my side, I think what I would say the areas would be around, just conscious of time, being very thoughtful about the development outcomes that you're trying to drive in that approach. The second one would be about thinking thoughtfully about the pipeline development, and at any point in time would be happy to answer questions people have there if they email me. And finally, with regard to value creation, just really thinking about ways to address the needs from the entrepreneurship development side, because one of the challenges at the moment is we need to support the ecosystem so we have more investable opportunities in this area. So it means that we're doing a lot more work, I think as Shuyin addressed as well, in supporting those companies in their development.
Eric?
Yes, so I think the 3 things I would say is that first you need to obviously walk the talk. And so you really need to build your own team in the way that you look at investments to have a bias in terms of having more women than less. Second is, of course, there are frankly many pioneers in this space, and there's a lot that we can learn from them. You know, some of them, like, you know, Shuyin and Jennifer have been doing it for a while, and of course there's others who have been doing it for even longer, and so we really should learn from them. But third, and most importantly, I think really is persistence. And so the reason that this hasn't taken off is because it's harder, and it's harder because there's a bias that's there in both men and women. And so we really need to be persistent and know that what we're doing is important. It's going to benefit, you know, all of humanity, and it's something that frankly will generate both very strong social returns as well as financial returns.
And Shuyin, from your end?
Right. I think firstly, for me, it's, you know, defining, you know, what's the goal, right? You know, for your organization. I think, you know, as we've heard from the different presentations and some of the questions, you know, gender lens investing can look a bit different. You know, some are more focused on supporting female entrepreneurs. Others are looking at sectors where there's a heavy concentration of women, right? And I think, you know, one's not better than the other. It's about finding what is most relevant and important for your organization to focus on. I think the second piece is a bit to do with Eric's point around persistence. It's around really building, you know, buy-in across your entire organization. I always think of gender lens investing a bit like a change management exercise, right? It does take time, persistence, and commitment. So I think having that buy-in, particularly from the very top, is so critical. The third piece is, you know, make it very, you know, practical and real and easy to use. I think, again, this, you know, gets to the heart of kind of execution and implementation. I think this is something that we learned, you know, having a simple tool, which is easy to use, can also be a robust one, and it actually gets done, which is one of the most important things. So that's what I would share.
Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. We're already past our webinar hour. So thank you very much. I would like to thank our three speakers, Jennifer, Shuyin, and Eric, for their time, their insights, and the audience for their participation and great questions for the speakers. I'm sorry we could not get to all the questions, and we will try and get the responses to you post the webinar. We're hosting a number of webinars over the coming weeks. Please look at our events page on our website for more information. Plus, as you can appreciate, this is the first of our Impact Fund webinar series. We are going to be hosting more of these along different themes during the course of the coming 12 months. Our annual conference is now 100% virtual and is from the 8th to the 12th of June. And we have a specific day focused on gender themes on the 9th of June and one focused on impact investing on the 12th of June. Please do sign up, and we look forward to welcoming you at the conference. We're now putting up a survey and would greatly appreciate it if you could take a few seconds to fill it out. And thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you online at an AVPN event soon.